The air inside the high-end custom wedding dress shop was filled with the expensive scent of essential oils. And the dome's Swarovski crystal chandelier refracted dazzling light. I stood in front of the enormous three-way mirror. The pure white lace train cascading like a waterfall onto the custom carpet. The reflection in the mirror showed a face that looked slightly pale from happiness. For this multi-million-dollar luxury wedding, I had poured almost all my heart and capital into it. I slightly lifted the hem of my skirt, just as I was about to have the assistant beside me fasten the last pearl button, when I vaguely heard a crackling, ambiguous sound coming from the VIP lounge. The intricately carved wooden door stood ajar, and a glare of red seeped through the crack. I remained silent, walking silently in my high heels, my fingertips gently pushing open the heavy door. What I saw before me shattered the illusion in the mirror into powder. My fiancé Ethan was pressing my best friend Jessica tightly against the sofa, their clothes in disarray. And the air was thick with a nauseating scent of betrayal. Startled by the door opening, Ethan turned his head abruptly. And when he saw it was me, a trace of panic flashed in his eyes. But it was quickly replaced by a forced calm. Jessica hurriedly grabbed her coat to cover her chest, her face lacking any trace of shame, instead wearing a taunting cold smile. "Clara, listen to my explanation. This is just an accident. Jessica and I just had too much to drink." Ethan fumbled with the buttons on his shirt, trying to gloss over it with those pale, weak lies. Jessica even brushed her disheveled hair back, stood up from the sofa with a slow, disdainful tone and said, "Clara, since you've seen it, I'll say it bluntly. Ethan has always loved me. You, who are nothing but a work-obsessed robot, can't give him the life he wants. If you have any sense, you should simply cancel this wedding." I looked at these two uglies in front of me, and there was no explosive crying, only a bone-chilling cold. I slowly raised my hand, grabbing a heavy tailoring scissors from the display rack beside me. The cold flash and the harsh tearing sound followed. I did not hesitate to stab the scissors into the expensive wedding dress, cutting the exquisite lace and silk inch by inch. Bright red blood oozed from the palm I had cut from overexertion, staining the pure white hem. I did not frown a single time. "Fine. As you wish." I coldly looked at them, pulled out my phone, and in front of both of them dialed the wedding planning company's number, calmly announcing, "Cancel all wedding reservations. Withdraw all final payments. Terminate the contract with the venue and the flowers immediately." When Ethan flushed white and rushed over to try to snatch the phone, I quickly pressed the group dial key, and the high-definition photos I had just taken outside the door, as well as the video of them in disarray, were instantly forwarded to both sets of parents, all relatives and friends, and the wedding guests in the large group chat. After finishing everything, I hurled the phone at Ethan's feet, turned and walked out of the bridal shop, and that evening booked a first-class ticket to fly overseas. From a bird's-eye view over London's financial district, the Thames winds like a grey-blue ribbon, slicing this ancient yet modern city in half. In the boardroom of top venture capital firm Apex Capital, steadfast rain pours outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, enveloping the entire skyscraper in a chilly mist. I sit at the head of the long table, dressed in a sharply tailored black haute couture suit, my long hair meticulously tied back, eyes as sharp as knives. 3 years have been enough to transform a woman who walked out of the ruins. I did not dwell in past pains. Instead, I turned every betrayal and wound into fuel for crazy absorbing knowledge and power. Fighting my way up until I sat on the partner's chair of this elite VC firm. On the table lay a thick due diligence report. On the cover page, the logo of a domestic mid-sized tech company, Quantum Tech, was boldly printed. This innovative enterprise specializes in core AI algorithms and is actively seeking up to $50 million in series of funding overseas. I opened the equity waterfall chart. My finger paused briefly on the founders list. And a familiar name jumped into my sight. Liam. Back then, Ethan could move our jointly held assets without hesitation and collude with outsiders to short my family business behind my back. And Liam, who had long played the role of strategist, was the principal accomplice. Even during my engagement with Ethan, Liam had repeatedly used the pretense of technical partner to shield Ethan's outrageous acts from outside discovery. The wheel of fate roared pleasantly at this moment. I closed the folder, raised my head, and scanned the senior analysts and risk control directors seated around the conference room. Their eyes held reverence and inquiry as they waited for this project's lead partner to make a decision. This company's recent financial statements and technical patents are highly dubious. On the surface, they look like a dark horse in the industry. But their core algorithms carry serious open-source infringement risks. I analyzed fluently in polished English, calm but with an unyielding authority. Moreover, their domestic parent company has already pledged all domestic assets that can be mortgaged to obtain this lifeline. Beside me, Vice President Jessica Note. This is a secondary character with the same name or background. Per instruction, all names in the text are kept in English for business progression. Immediately opened a data appendix. Clara. Since the risk is so high, why are we prioritizing this project for evaluation? If we engage hastily, it could bring unnecessary reputational damage to the company. I coldly curled my lips, raised the black coffee by my side, and looked through the huge floor-to-ceiling window at the overcast sky. Because I want them to thrust their necks into the noose of their own accord. I want them to think they've found a savior. And then, at the moment they are most triumphant and confident of victory, I will personally cast them into an abyss beyond redemption. The conference room fell into a hush. Everyone slightly daunted by the fierce aura radiating from me. No one knew that the Chinese girl who had blood on her hands and was a wreck in a bridal shop 3 years ago had since grown into a hunter capable of turning the clouds on the international capital markets. I immediately issued He directive. Notify Quantum Tech's overseas liaison team and say that Apex Capital is very interested in their Series A. Invite their core management to London next week to conduct face-to-face, in-depth business negotiations. Remember, raise your stance. Make them think this is a rare comeback opportunity. After the meeting, the empty conference room was left with only me. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking at my reflection in the glass, the eyes cold, without a ripple of emotion. Revenge has never been a sudden impulse or hysteria. It is like this meticulously arranged game of chess before me, where every move must be precise, graceful, and deadly. Liam. Ethan. Do you think escaping to the crest of the tech wave will keep you safe? The hell you two brought into my life 3 years ago. I return to you unmoved, exactly as it was. I slowly withdraw my gaze and close the material about quantum tech on the table. In the old private restaurant of the Ledbury, a venerable institution in the city of London, the air carried the rich aroma of truffles and aged wine. This restaurant has always been a secret base for political and business luminaries discussing multi-million and billion-dollar mergers. With heavy velvet curtains blocking out the outside clamor, I sat in a secluded booth, wearing a dark emerald velvet gown, a minimalist diamond necklace at my throat, exuding an aura of nobility and cold, unapproachable allure. On the table lay several fully English due diligence documents. My fingertips tapped lightly on the table, producing a crisp, rhythmic sound. The private room door was slowly pushed open by a waiter, and Liam stepped in. this former ambitious young partner of the domestic tech circle. Now 3 years of hustle in the business world had added a touch of weariness and anxiety to his brow. When he saw the mysterious partner at the head of the table, who had full control of this 50 million financing negotiation, his entire body stiffened. The smile on his face freezing solid. Ethan followed closely, instinctively lifting his head. Upon seeing my face, his color drained completely, and he staggered back as if seeing a ghost, nearly dropping the briefcase in his hands. Clara. How is this possible? Ethan's voice was hoarse, filled with disbelief, fear, and panic. He could never have imagined that the woman who, 3 years ago, was betrayed by him and Jessica and made to leave with nothing, would now become a top-tier venture capital partner who would determine their life or death. Liam reacted first, forcing down the astonishment in his eyes, trying to force a commercial smile, awkwardly saying, So the senior partner for Greater China and overseas at Apex Capital is Miss Clara. How impolite of us to not have expected to meet again in London in this fashion. I did not bat an eyelid. Nor did I invite them to take a seat. I merely coldly flipped open a page of the audit report beside me and interrupted their small talk with fluent, icy English. Mr. Liam. Mr. Ethan. Today is a business negotiation. Please do not bring private emotions into this legitimate commercial setting. If you feel uncomfortable with me leading this project, go out to the right. London is not short of companies willing to walk away from their bottom lines to take over. My tone was extremely calm, yet carried an unyielding pressure, instantly quashing all prepared pleasantries. Ethan stepped forward abruptly, his eyes flashing with a complex glimmer, attempting to use emotional leverage to break through my defenses. Clara. The events at the wedding dress shop back then. We were wrong. But it was just a momentary lapse. These years have been hard on me and the company. Since you have this power now, you can't hold on to old feelings and give us a hand. As long as this 50 million is in place, our core technology can fully spread hearing the words old feelings. I finally raised my eyes slowly, my gaze as sharp as a blade cutting across his pale face. A cruel yet exquisitely beautiful arc curling at the corners of my mouth. Old feelings. Ethan. When you conspired with outsiders to move my family's assets and did those despicable things with Jessica in the wedding dress shop, did you ever think about old feelings? I slammed the financial report down on the table with a thud, interrupting him sharply. Don't try to disgust me here. According to Apex Capital's independent third-party audit, your company's core algorithm is suspected of massive infringement. Overseas patents have fatal legal loopholes. And even the revenue data you recently submitted are seriously inflated with false accounting. Today I ask you here not to reminisce, but to inform you. Due to your severe financial fraud and credit default risk, Apex Capital officially terminates any financing interest in quantum tech. And we reserve the right to pursue legal accountability against you. Upon hearing this, Liam's face turned as white as a sheet, while Ethan collapsed completely in his chair, unable to utter a single complete sentence. The air in the private dining room of a high-end London restaurant was so still it seemed to drip water. Ethan and Liam, upon hearing that the funding had completely dried up, had their flushed faces drained of color. But this was only the first step in this meticulously staged slaughter. Far away in the homeland, Jessica did not know about the London negotiation table's brutal defeat. She sat in the headquarters building of a domestic tech company, anxiously awaiting news of funding success. For this financing, she had emptied all her savings and even privately diverted the guarantee for the company's core project. As night deepened, Only the hum of the central air conditioner remained in the domestic headquarters office. Jessica looked at the debt collection notices popping up on her phone screen, and her anxiety grew like wild grass. The chaos and warfare across the ocean had not reached the homeland. But Jessica's trust in Ethan had long been exhausted by endless lies. She suddenly dialed Ethan's encrypted video call. When the screen connected, the background showed a hotel suite in London that exuded despair. Ethan's face was haggard as he slumped into the back of a sofa chair, his eyes bloodshot. Jessica's hysterical scream immediately rang from the phone. "Ethan, what the hell are you up to? Didn't we agree that the funds would be in by today? Why did the finance director just tell me that overseas accounts have received nothing at all? Not even the contingency funds?" Ethan, irritated by her sharp voice, finally exploded with suppressed rage. "Shut up. It's because your fake accounting and covert asset transfers back then got exposed. The lead investor this time is Clara. Not only did she not give a cent, she's almost pulled our pants down. We're finished. Our company is about to go bankrupt and liquidate." Jessica on the other end slammed the coffee cup in her hand onto the carpet when she heard the name Clara. The brown liquid splashed everywhere. She would never have imagined that the once weakened woman who they had jointly schemed against and left with nothing could 3 years later become a capital magnate holding life and death power, personally pushing them into an abyss. All these dialogues and images were being transmitted in real time via a highly covert high-definition encrypted line to my giant holographic screen in my top-floor London apartment. I sat in a leather sofa, holding a glass of red wine, and watched the ugly dog seen on the screen with a cold eye. Standing beside me was the executive director I had secretly planted at Quantum Tech's headquarters back then. She looked at the two distorted faces on the screen and reported in a low voice. "Ms. Clara. As you predicted, Jessica, after learning that the funds are hopeless, has started to suspect Ethan of secretly transferring assets and intends to run away alone. The two have torn into each other on the phone, even beginning to threaten to reveal the evidence of their illegal fake contracts and malicious shorting of your family business from back then." I gently swirled the red wine in my glass. The crimson liquid traced a beautiful arc along the glass wall, and a cold smile played at the corner of my lips. I don't need to tear them apart myself. Human nature is the sharpest weapon in this world. I slightly turned my head and coldly instructed the subordinate beside me. "Since they've started dog-eating dog, we must add fuel to the fire. Immediately activate the fake competitor acquisition intent plan we prepared in advance." A leak claimed that international tech giant Omnicorp intends to acquire Quantum Tech's core patents in full, but only on the condition that all founders' teams with legal risks be stripped of their stakes, especially all shares held by Jessica and Ethan. The news hit like a bomb, fed through special channels directly to the domestic company's core executives who had long been on edge. The team, already on the brink of collapse due to a broken financing chain, instantly exploded into chaos. To protect themselves, several other founding shareholders and technical backbones of the company held an emergency board meeting overnight and drafted a multi-decade-long impeachment statement. They not only publicly accused Ethan and Jessica of serious embezzlement and business fraud during their tenure, but also directly sent to major domestic financial media outlets ironclad evidence that the two had recently conspired to transfer company assets and manipulate accounts privately. Back at the domestic headquarters, Jessica had hoped to struggle to turn the tide. But in the dead of night she suddenly received an urgent notice from the company she was ousted by an absolute majority vote of the board, and security personnel forced the seal on her office door. She looked at the empty corridor and the indifferent, scornful gazes of surrounding colleagues, finally realizing she had become a completely abandoned piece on the chessboard. She hysterically wanted to call Ethan, only to find that she had already been blocked by him. In the backstage of the domestic high-tech summit's main venue, crystal chandeliers refract dazzling light, and the air is thick with the scent of premium perfume mingling with tense sweat. In the waiting room, Ethan stands before the mirror adjusting his tie repeatedly, trying to hide his extreme fear behind this elite disguise. To salvage the company's teetering reputation and to prove to the world that quantum tech still has irreplaceable industry value, he used his last connections to force his way into this industry-leading summit, gathering countless investors and mainstream media. And he was scheduled to deliver the keynote in the afternoon as the finale. Yet his phone was wildly vibrating in his pocket, and on the screen kept popping up screenshots of internal company group chats that had spiraled out of control, along with sharp questions from major financial media reporters. Ethan. Several teams of investigators and financial reporters have arrived outside, and the organizer's chairman is looking for you everywhere. If you mishandle the negative public opinion about the company, your appearance will be directly cancelled. The assistant rushed into the waiting room, pale as a ghost, reporting the latest situation. Ethan suddenly spun around, slapping the makeup table hard, his face distorted with rage as he roared, "What panic? Everyone shut up. If I finish this speech and secure the next round of cooperation, all crises will be resolved." He drew a deep breath, forcibly suppressing his racing heart, and, amid the staff's urging, walked up the stairs to the main venue with stiff steps. Meanwhile, thousands of kilometers away in London, in front of the floor-to-ceiling window of a luxury hotel, the global live broadcast of the summit was playing. I leaned against a large velvet sofa, holding a glass of Burgundy in my hand, watching the holographic screen with a calm gaze as the suited man on stage spoke passionately. 3 years ago, it was with this grand facade that he promised me a perfect wedding while secretly scheming with Jessica on how to drain my family's lifeblood. On the screen, Ethan was talking about the company's grand blueprint for the future. Sporadic applause from the audience sounded particularly ironic, just as Ethan reached the crucial breakthrough in technology. The center-aligned, multi-million-dollar ultra-high-definition LED main screen in the main venue suddenly blacked out without warning. Immediately, the previously elegant PPT background vanished, replaced by a lengthy 100-page financial fraud and embezzlement report stamped with the seal of an authoritative auditing firm. The screen clearly itemized every transaction Ethan and Jessica had run in recent years through forged contracts, malicious short selling, and hidden overseas assets, even including a complete chain of evidence and chat screenshots of their joint transfer of assets from the former fiancé's family. The entire main venue fell into a brief silence before erupting into a thunderous uproar. "Oh my God! What on earth is going on? Quantum tech has been falsifying everything all along." The reporters in the audience instantly turned into sharks scenting blood, countless flashes of cameras wildly blinking toward Ethan on stage, the shutter sounds forming a piercing noise. A few industry tycoons and investors who had rushed over turned pale, tearing off their guest badges from their chests and angrily turning away. On stage, Ethan stared at the incriminating evidence on the screen. His legs buckled, nearly collapsing from the podium. He opened his mouth, his face from pale to ashen, a choking sound in his throat. Yet he couldn't utter a single word of defense. The live chat exploded at this moment. Millions of viewers online were frantically flooding the feed, turning Ethan and Jessica into the hottest topics on major social platforms. I watch Ethan on the screen, a wretched, doggone figure, and a cold, bone-deep curve tugs at the corners of my mouth. This is only the beginning. When the stock price plummets at the moment of opening, and billions in market value evaporate in an instant, That is when true hell descends. In the executive lounge of a certain multinational five-star hotel in London. It was pouring outside. Hail like rain pelted the floor-to-ceiling glass, making a dull racket. The lounge was terrifyingly quiet. And the precious Persian carpet swallowed every footstep completely. Jessica wore a crumpled trench coat, her hair in disarray, and her face as pale as paper. She limped on a pair of high heels with a broken heel and shakily pushed open the carved wooden door of the VIP box. The domestic company had collapsed completely. Assets frozen across the board. And the internet was full of smears, pressing down on her like a few mountains. She clenched the last first-class ticket to London in her hand, gambling everything to find the legendary female investor who held life and death in her hands, praying for a glimmer of a way out. When she staggered into the box and saw the figure sitting on the leather sofa, tea in hand, all her luck vanished in that instant. I slowly raised my eyelids, my gaze calm and condescending, fixed on her with no surprise. As if I had expected she would flee here like a stray dog. Jessica trembled violently from head to toe. Her legs gave way, and she fell to the cold marble floor in a stiff kneel. She kneeled forward ungracefully, stretched out her tremulous hands to grab the hem of my custom-made dress, and let out a broken cry. "Clara, please, spare me this time. I really know I was wrong. Ethan forced me to betray you back then. I was just a pawn." I frowned slightly in disgust, stepped back coldly, and avoided the dirty hand her nails had touched. The bodyguard standing to my side stepped forward at once, forcibly separating Jessica, leaving her to helplessly lie on the floor. I raised the porcelain teacup, took a light sip of the black tea, and spoke with no warmth in my red lips. "Pawn, Jessica. 3 years ago in the bridal shop, you strutted in and told me that a robot who only cared about work like me could never provide Ethan with the life he wanted, advising me to be sensible and magnanimous. Why didn't you realize you were a pawn then?" Each word felt like a blade coated with poison, ruthlessly stabbing into her scarred heart. Upon hearing this, Jessica's face lost the last trace of color, and she collapsed despairingly to the ground, her eyes full of incredulous fear. She finally understood that the multinational capital tycoon who could reduce everything we had painstakingly built over the years to ashes with a casual joke was actually Clara, who had humiliated her countless times and left her with nothing. The enormous psychological pressure and the despair of bankruptcy overwhelmed her last line of defense, and she began to sneer hysterically, rotting into madness. "Fine. So you've been plotting revenge from the beginning. If you hate me so much, do you have the guts to kill me? Do you think you've won? Ethan still has something in his hands. What does he have in his hands? The transfer receipts proving you all colluded to forge contracts and illegally embezzle my family's assets. Or the passwords to the money laundering accounts you set up overseas." I coldly cut off her hysterics, flicking a thick pile of documents onto the coffee table with a snap. The cover page of the documents was glaringly prominent application for multinational asset freezing and criminal proceedings. I looked down on her with a hauteur, my eyes as cold as an ice sculpture. "Jessica, open your eyes and read clearly. Just half an hour ago, the High Court of London and domestic economic investigation agencies simultaneously issued asset freezing orders and global warrants against you. All your properties, luxury cars, deposits, even the private money tucked away in Swiss banks, have all been legally frozen." Jessica trembled as she rushed toward the coffee table, flipping open the document. When she saw the cleared judicial seal and a series of shocking charges listed there, a despairing wail torn from her throat, and she collapsed completely to the ground, her eyes hollow, unable to utter another word. I did not give her another glance. I coldly instructed the security personnel beside me. Take this illegal intruder out. And inform the Interpol officers waiting at the door. They've been looking for this fugitive for a long time. Several officers in uniform quickly entered the private room, ignoring Jessica's anguished struggles, and efficiently snapped cold handcuffs onto her wrists. In a top-floor suite of a 7-star luxury hotel on the banks of the Thames in London, the giant floor-to-ceiling windows offered a sweeping view of half of London's sparkling nightscape. Yet the atmosphere in the room was as cold as an ice cellar. Ethan sat alone on the leather sofa, his once expensive tailor-made suit now wrinkled, his tie crooked, stubble ragged. The once promising business elite now looked like a stray dog. The room's LCD TV continuously played rolling news from domestic financial channels about Quantum Tech's complete bankruptcy liquidation and the founders being wanted for massive financial crimes. Each news item struck him like a hammer, making it hard for him to breathe. Ding-dong, the doorbell suddenly shattered the deathly silence. Ethan trembled all over, sprang up from the sofa like a startled bird. He rushed to the door in 3 steps, yanked it open, thinking it was the police or a debt collector. But standing outside weren't law enforcement but a group of guards in black, coldly lining up on both sides to clear a passage. Immediately after, a figure in a high-end black tailored overcoat and high heels walked in calmly. I raised my chin slightly, my gaze as sharp as a knife skimming over Ethan's pitiful face, and calmly walked to the sofa to sit down elegantly. When Ethan realized the visitor was me, a flash of extreme fear crossed his eyes, but then it was followed by a madness of desperation. He slammed the door shut with a thud, and, as if grabbing the last lifebuoy, lunged toward the coffee table, his voice hoarse and desperate. "Clara, it's you. You orchestrated all of this, didn't you? Please, for the sake of our engagement and all the wonderful memories we shared, spare me a way out. If you're willing to stand up and plead with the court and the venture capitalists to revoke that debt, I swear I'll repay you by working like a beast for you from now on." As he spoke, he even reached out to touch the surface of my shoe, his eyes full of twisted pleading and reluctance. I frowned in disgust, gracefully lifted my cane. Andley kept his hand away, looking at this man who once swore eternal loyalty but now had sunk to begging on all fours. I felt nothing but irony and revulsion. I slowly took out a delicate voice recorder from my bag and pressed play. Instantly, Jessica's hysterical, unreserved confession before the capture echoed in the empty suite. It was Ethan who forced me to do all this. He planned all the fake accounting schemes, had me forge contracts to transfer Clara's family assets. He even hid an overseas secret account filled with dirty money diverted for the wedding preparations. He basically wants to use me as a scapegoat and run away at any moment. As the recording finished, Ethan shrunk like struck by lightning, his face deathly pale. He widened his eyes, pointing at the recorder, his voice trembling violently. This is fake. Jessica. That bitch. How dare she betray me? She's pinning all the blame on me alone." I looked at him, a scornful smile curling my lips, and spoke with icy coldness. "Fake. Ethan. At this point you're still lying to yourself. Jessica didn't just expose all your crimes and money laundering channels. She's also submitted as core evidence the original documents on how you and she colluded to short sell my father's company and forge signatures to transfer equity to Interpol and the Economic Investigation Authorities. No. Impossible. How dare she do this to me? We were in the same boat." Ethan was utterly on the verge of a nervous breakdown, clutching his head with both hands, his face contorted as he roared, the last shred of his defenses. once the most trustworthy and closest ally he had, was mercilessly betrayed by none other than Jessica, who had always seemed to bow to him and go to any length for him. He never imagined that the woman who normally appeared so compliant, who would do anything for him, would, when faced with prison and an absolute conflict of interest, ruthlessly drive the deepest knife into him without hesitation. The dog-eat-dog drama had reached its peak. And that was the ending I wanted to see. I slowly stood up, looking down at Ethan, who lay on the ground with blank eyes, and spoke as if delivering a verdict on a death row inmate. Ethan, when you personally ruined that wedding in the bridal shop 3 years ago, you should have foreseen today. This isn't revenge. It's karma that cannot escape. As my words fell, the suite door was slammed open. A group of tall international criminal police and domestic economic investigators walked in with stern expressions. The lead officer produced an arrest warrant and spoke coldly. Mr. Ethan, you are suspected of major economic fraud, embezzlement of duties, and money laundering. You are under arrest in accordance with the law. The icy handcuffs snapped onto Ethan's wrists as he writhed violently, his face ashen, and he collapsed to the ground, unable to utter a complete plea for mercy. Outside the courthouse, the noonday sun pierced through the veil of days, lighting up the wide square to a brilliant brightness. Yet a grim and somber atmosphere still hung in the air. The courthouse steps were already crowded with mainstream media and financial reporters who had rushed over at the news. Cameras with long guns and short cannons covered both sides of the steps in dense rows. Flashbulbs flickered one after another, composing a blinding white sea, everyone's gaze fixated on the solemn, heavy double doors, waiting for the final verdict in this nationwide sensational case of major multinational economic fraud and embezzlement to arrive. 3 years of patience and plotting were about to be transformed at this moment into the sharpest sword of the law, to sever all roots of ugliness. Bang with a crisp, solemn sound of the gavel striking in the courtroom. The presiding judge spoke the lengthy final judgment with a grave expression. The gallery was packed with representatives from various sectors and industry experts. On the defendant's bench, Ethan and Jessica sat slumped in their wooden chairs, their once well-tailored suits now hanging loosely on their increasingly gaunt, disheveled bodies. The presiding judge's voice rang clear and strong through every corner of the courtroom. Defendants Ethan and Jessica are guilty of embezzlement, contract fraud, illegal transfer of assets, and money laundering. The facts are clear and the evidence chain is complete. For multiple offenses, Ethan is sentenced to 15 years in prison and his personal illicit gains shall be confiscated in full. Jessica is sentenced to 12 years in prison and shall be fined. As the verdict was officially announced, the spectators hushed into murmurs and sighs. When Jessica heard the 12-year term, her knees buckled, and she collapsed onto the defense table, crying out in shattered despair, repeatedly muttering, "How could this happen? How could it be so severe?" Ethan, meanwhile, seemed drained of all soul, his eyes hollowly staring at the ceiling, his face as pale as paper, with not a shred of strength left to mount any rebuttal. They had once schemed and betrayed to trample the law and siphon off others' lifelong labor. Now, confronted with mountains of incontrovertible evidence, all pretense and luck were stripped away, and they faced their rightful punishment. At exactly 2 in the afternoon, several solemn-looking court officers escorted Ethan and Jessica, wearing cold handcuffs, out through the courthouse side door. The glaring sunlight instantly fell on their miserable faces. They instinctively shielded their light with their shackled wrists, but were immediately surrounded by a surrounding mob of journalists and blinking lights. "Mr. Ethan, do you have anything to say about the 15-year sentence?" Ms. Jessica, you previously joined forces to ruin your fiancé's family business. Do you feel regret? Countless sharp, piercing questions flooded in like a tide. Flashbulbs blinking frantically, forever freezing their showy downfall on the front pages of major media. At the same time, I dressed in a sharply tailored white professional suit, wearing black sunglasses, and walked down the steps on the other side of the courthouse with several professional legal advisors and security personnel around me. Calm and unhurried. A light breeze brushed my long hair, and my expression was calm and aloof, with no trace of triumph or revenge. In the face of the wave of reporters flocking toward me and turning their lenses toward me, I paused slightly. Anne, facing the live cameras of dozens of media outlets, spoke in a firm, steady voice. Justice may be late, but it will never be absent. Today is not only the final judgment for criminals but also a stern warning to all who would trample contract spirit and moral bottom lines. What's mine? Not a single cent less. The crimes I committed must ultimately be repaid with freedom. As soon as the words fell, I didn't give the reporters any more opportunity to press questions. Under the tight escort of bodyguards, I calmly boarded the black Rolls-Royce Phantom waiting on the roadside. The doors closed slowly, sealing off the outside world's clamor, flashing lights, and the faces that once were arrogant but now lie in shackles in another world. I leaned against the comfortable, soft leather seat, slowly took off my sunglasses, and turned to look at the rapidly retreating street scenery outside the window. 3 years ago, the version of myself covered in blood in the bridal shop, cornered and driven to the edge, has finally completed a nirvana rebirth at this moment. All debts have been settled. The seized assets have been recovered through lawful channels and re-injected into the foundation under my name. In the vast departure hall of the international airport, beneath the dome, crowds thronged. Travelers dragging suitcases hurried along, and announcements constantly broadcast flight information to destinations around the world. This is a harbor of parting, and also a crossroads where countless destinies intersect. I wore a delicately tailored beige trench coat, with a black turtleneck cashmere underneath, and stepped in elegant high heels, strolling calmly through the spacious, bright VIP security channel, to completely settle all domestic asset handovers and legal wrap-ups. I had lingered in this land for one final week. Now, all legal documents had been signed, and the holding group under my name had thoroughly completed the annexation and restructuring of the remaining assets. I only carried a minimalist Hermes briefcase and prepared to take the night's first-class flight directly to London, to return to the international capital core circle I had built with my own hands. However, just as I was about to step into the VIP lounge corridor, an extremely abrupt figure exuding a strong stench of acid and despair suddenly shot out from behind a nearby pillar, wildly flinging his arms wide and blocking my way. I frowned slightly, calmly raising my eyes to meet the gaze of this withered man. Where had this Ethan of old, who once shone as a rising star in the business world, gone? His designer suit was stained and creased like pickled vegetables. His hair looked as if he hadn't been washed for months. His eyes were filled with dense bloodshot, and the hollows under his eyes were deeply sunken. The entire person gaunt and emaciated. Recently released on legal parole or suspended from custody under special procedures or a brief gap while awaiting a final retrial. Or perhaps he had blown through the family fortune to secure bail or medical parole. He looked like a cornered beast, tremoring violently all over, staring fixedly at me. He gritted his teeth, his forehead veins bulging, using every last ounce of his strength to squeeze from the depths of his throat the question that had tormented him for countless days and nights, driving him to despair. Why did you disappear without a word? It's been 3 years. Why did you push me and the company to death with such ruthless means? I trusted you so much. We once almost walked into the sanctum of marriage together. Why did you have to go this far? Why? The surrounding air seemed to crystallize at that moment. Passers-by paused and turned to watch this sudden farce. Airport security and guards quickly closed in on a half-surrounded formation. Hands on security batons at their waists. Their eyes sharp as they fixed on this emotionally out-of-control man. Yet I did not retreat a single step. Not even a trace of emotion moving across my face. From a height above him, I looked down at this man who once prided himself on being extraordinarily clever. Now collapsed under the wheels of the times. With neither pity nor anger in my heart. Only a cold indifference from on high. Under the dome of the giant departure hall at the international airport. The dazzling incandescent lights bleached the marble floor spotless. The surroundings were crowded with people. Countless travelers slowed their steps, watching this sudden farce with doubt and astonishment. Airport security and fully armed guards had quickly closed in from all sides. A few firm fingers already resting on the tactical baton at their waists. Ready to pin the emotionally out-of-control man who looked nearly insane to the ground at any moment. Yet I did not utter a single urging word. Nor did I take a step back. I just stood quietly in place. Arms crossed over my chest. Letting the cold air flow between us. Ethan's eyes, red-rimmed with blood, ferociously bore into me. Their sockets sunken from extreme unwillingness and anger. His facial muscles twitching violently. 3 years ago, on the eve of the wedding, he thought he'd only committed a mistake that any man might make. Believing that a few sweet words and hypocritical remorse would easily toy with his fiancée who worked hard and kept her head down. He could never have imagined that in these 3 years, the weak woman whom he betrayed, whom he had treated as abandoned, would be tempered into a peerless blade amidst overseas capital flows, crushing his self-built business empire, his reputation, and all his fraudulent luck with absolute dominance, leaving him stripped bare. Why did you disappear without a word? Ethan's voice croaked again, accompanied by brutal gasps. His spittle almost splattering onto my windbreaker. His once unchecked hands, now muddy with despair, reached forward to grab my arm as if clutching at the last lifeline. Clara, tell me, why are you so cruel? Why didn't you make a sound and disappear? And then as a ghost drive us all out of the shadows? Do you really have no heart? Is our 3-year relationship really not worth a thought in your eyes? Facing his hysterical accusations and his near-breaking cry, I did not show the slightest hint of sympathy. Instead, I elegantly curved my lips into a smile. A very soft and cold sneer. The smile didn't reach my eyes, but carried a contemptuous coldness that looked down on ants from above. I slightly turned my head, letting the diamond earrings by my ears reflect a blinding light. I spoke in extremely calm, yet fluent English loud enough for everyone around to hear. Delivering the sentence that would utterly shatter him. Word by word. Do you really not know? Those 5 words struck like 5 heavy hammers, smashing fiercely on Ethan's crown. His body stiffened abruptly, the madness in his eyes instantly freezing into extreme fear. He opened his mouth wide, making choking sounds in his throat, but could no longer utter a single word. Of course he knew the reason. He knew how unforgivable the disgusting things he had done with Jessica in the bridal shop were. How vile it was to forge contracts with Liam and maliciously embezzle the family assets of the fiancé's family. He wasn't unaware. He just wouldn't admit it. And he refused to believe that there could really be someone in this world who would 10-fold or 100-fold exact revenge for betrayal. Just before the moment his legs gave way and he completely collapsed to the ground. Several trained airport police officers no longer afforded him any chance to entangle himself. Two sturdy security guards sprang forward quickly from the sides. One grabbed his arms firmly. The other calmly pinned him face down on the pristine marble floor. Ethan's cheek pressed tightly against the cold tiles. He let out a painful grunt, his hands struggling desperately. But to no avail. Like a gnat rattling at a bronze wall, his already ragged hair clung to his forehead. Looking as miserable as a real prodigal dog, I didn't even spare him a single glance from the corner of my eye. From the beginning to the end, my gaze remained as calm and unruffled as a still pool. As if the man pressed underfoot wasn't my fiancé but merely an insignificant speck of dust. I slowly retracted my gaze, straightened the collar of my coat, and stepped in those high heels, elegantly striding past Ethan, who lay pressed to the ground. The surrounding onlookers gasped and murmured, flashes popping one after another. But I had already stood tall, not looking back, and headed straight into the VIP boarding corridor deeper inside. The roaring behind me, the struggling, and the security guard's warnings were completely cut off by the thick soundproof glass and the ensuing electronic doors. Outside the porthole of the international first-class cabin, night was as ink, and stars dotted the sky. This was a giant airliner bound straight for London. And within the spacious private suite flowed a soothing cello symphony, with a faint white tea fragrance filling the air. I leaned against the soft leather seatback, wearing a comfortable cashmere loungewear, my long hair casually falling over my shoulders. Several 10,000 meters above the ground, the clamor of the earth, the airport's awkwardness, the judgment of laws, and the man who once dragged me into hell were completely separated from another world. There, everything, including those ugly faces and the horse whales, had turned into dust left by the Earth's rotation, no longer stirring a single ripple in my heart. The flight attendant walked over with graceful steps, a crystal tray balanced in the gloved hands, containing a bottle of just opened top-tier champagne and a tall crystal glass. Ms. Clara, this French aged champagne was specially prepared for you by the captain to wish you a pleasant flight, and to preface your future business achievements in London. The attendant's voice was soft and respectful, with a gaze that carried reverence born from awe of a powerful person. I nodded slightly, picked up the crystal glass, watching the fine golden bubbles rise and burst along the rim, refracting a dazzling and captivating light. I gently swirled the glass, brought the rim to my lips, and took a sip of the liquid with a slight acidity and sweetness. 3 years ago, when I pushed open that half-ajar wooden door in a high-end custom wedding dress shop and watched Ethan and Jessica betray me without restraint, my world collapsed into a ruin in an instant. The moment's despair, suffocation, and heartache, now looking back, seemed like things from last century. I did not choose to wallow in pain, nor did I choose hysterical crying and entanglement. Instead, I sewed up all the wounds and transformed all the humiliation into a sharpened blade of poison. I spent 3 full years fighting in a foreign land's sea of capital. From an abandoned would-be wife to a top partner who controlled life and death power over multinational capital, I personally laid traps, luring them step by step into the abyss of greed, and then used the coldest, most legal means to strip away everything they relied on, so they could taste betrayal and ruin in front of the court. The engine's low, steady roar came from outside the window. The airframe shuddered slightly, piercing the last thick layer of clouds. Beneath the porthole, vast land lay hidden in endless darkness, and on the distant horizon, a golden dawn was slowly breaking, casting myriad rays of light across the boundless sky. It was a grandeur that rose above the storm, a true rebirth after the furnace of fire. I set the champagne glass down. My gaze calm and resolute as I looked outward. Past enmity and grudges dissolved here, leaving only a tougher soul and an unstoppable ambition. The legend that belongs to me, Clara, was just beginning. And my business empire would bloom with the most dazzling light above the clouds. I closed my eyes slightly, feeling the free wind whistling past my ears, and savoring this hard-won, superior pride and tranquility. Outside the top-floor Apex Capital headquarters in the City of London. Night has fallen, and the city's lights spread like broken diamonds along the banks of the Thames. In front of the floor-to-ceiling windows, I hold a cup of warm black coffee, my gaze calmly inspecting my reflection in the glass. A tailored charcoal gray cashmere suit, an impeccably neat bun, and a gaze free of any unnecessary tumult. On the desk, dozens of fully English due diligence reports pertaining to the next round of European tech giant acquisitions are neatly stacked. Red labels gleaming faintly under the cold white spotlights. The heavy solid wood door of the office is gently knocked. The assistant pushes it open, strides in on high heels to a spot 3 steps from the desk, and speaks with respectful efficiency. Sister Clara. The latest from the domestic side. Ethan, during his imprisonment, attempted to bribe fellow inmates several times to pass fraudulent letters and has been moved by prison authorities to the highest level strict control area. As for Jessica, due to a complete emotional breakdown early in imprisonment, she is currently undergoing psychological intervention treatment, and all remaining assets after liquidation have been channeled into our charity and legal aid foundation. I do not turn around, only nod softly. Place the coffee cup on its saucer with a clear porcelain clink. Understood. The domestic legal procedures are now fully concluded. There's no need to monitor their movements any longer. Our focus is next week's closed-door meeting with the European Joint Board for the acquisition. I don't want any details to leak. The assistant nods and takes the cue, placing a new guide on patent infringement avoidance on the desk. Then quietly exits, closing the door behind him. The office returns to a hollow, luxurious silence. I turn, walk to the expansive genuine leather chair, and sit, my gaze resting on a vintage round mirror on the marble coffee table. The face in the mirror is exquisite. Cold. Flawless, there isn't a trace of the pure, frantic girl from that small domestic city who had scrambled to prepare for her wedding. Back then I truly believed that if I gave my all and trusted without reservation, I could secure a lifelong companionship. I spent months choosing the gilded font for wedding invitations. Visited every flower shop in town to find the perfect bouquet. And even stayed up late to burn my eyes over data vulnerabilities in Ethan's startup. Yet all those careful hopes and deep feelings were ripped apart by hands stained with betrayal and greed in the VIP lounge of a high-end wedding dress boutique. That scene still occasionally flickers in my mind. But it no longer wounds. It seems more like an absurd drama from another era. Betrayal is a double-edged sword. They thought lies and indifference could plunge me into an abyss. But they didn't know that the phoenix, after being scorched by fire, would have bones tougher than steel. I never regret the decisive turn I took. Nor did I feel the slightest void after revenge succeeded. For those who trample the bottom line and break their promises, the law's judgment and society's contempt are their deserved end. My end, however, lies above the starry seas of the commercial map. I pull my thoughts back. Let my slender fingers return to the keyboard. And with a crisp tapping, line after line of strategic plans in full English illuminate the screen. The Thames outside continues to flow east day and night, washing away the city's scars and splendor. My legend has already opened a new chapter. And those who tried to pull me into the mire, including the farcical drama from 3 years ago, are but insignificant dust on the road to the pinnacle. I lift my head to the brilliant night sky outside. And my eyes are only filled with determination and boundless ambition. Extra Chapter 2. At 10,000 meters above the Atlantic. Outside the private business jet's porthole is an endless, vast sea of stars. The cabin lights are set to the softest dark amber. And the air is filled with the calm scent of high-grade cedar and agarwood. I lean against the wide, comfortable leather sofa, wrapped in a cashmere shawl, holding a glass of soda with ice. The bubbles gently pop against the glass, making delicate sounds. On the table sits a tablet that is running. The screen live ticking with Apex Capital's latest stock price curves after Europe's market open. The green bar chart shots up triumphantly, signaling a perfect victory in a new round of acquisitions. 3 years are enough to move a sea and sand. And also enough to let a woman who once fell to the bottom grasp the reins of destiny firmly in her own hand. All domestic matters, with that trial that shook the entire business circle, have been sealed away at the bottom of memory. Ethan, spending his long, desperate years behind iron bars, may countless times recall the silhouette that decisively turned away in the bridal shop. And Jessica, in the cold psychological intervention therapy, will ultimately pay the full price for her past greed and betrayal. They have staged the ugliest, most satirical tragedy with their lives. And I am merely an observer and player at the chessboard of this tragedy. I set down the water glass and look through the porthole at the deep night sky outside, thinking back to 3 years ago, when I, with blood on my hands, faced the wind and rain alone on the streets of London. A faint ripple of emotion stirs in my heart. At that time, I believed love and trust were unshakable foundations for a lifetime, until reality smashed them to pieces. I finally understood that in this world, only absolute power and a clear, sober self are the armor that will never betray you. I did not lose myself in the revelry of vengeance, nor did I feel emptiness after victory, because revenge is never the end. It is merely the stumbling block I must remove to ascend to a higher peak. Outside the private jet's cabin door, the co-pilot's soft reminder comes. Ms. Clara, we expect to land at London Heathrow Airport in 2 hours. Ground-exclusive motorcades are already waiting at the VIP large passenger channel. I respond with a faint nod, retracting my gaze from the starry sky. Ahead of me awaits the next billion-level play in Europe's new energy technology field. Countless looming capital giants, and an even vaster, more boundless empire of commerce. I reorganize my appearance, completely packaging and sealing away the past. And a sharp, calm light rekindles in my eyes. The wind above the clouds is always biting, but I am glad that, now, I possess wings that can soar shoulder to shoulder with this sky. In Outer 3. Inside the private club of the highest standard in the city of London. Under the dome. A melodious cello and piano duet drifted through the air. And the scent of premium cigars and aged cognac filled the atmosphere. This is the power core circle where Europe's top plutocrats and capital magnates hold closed-door talks. Crystal chandeliers refracted their light on the precious Wenge-long table, making every imposing and prudent face around it appear exceptionally clear. I wore a bespoke midnight blue velvet evening dress, my long hair neatly gathered at the back, with no extraneous jewelry at my neck, only a minimalist platinum brooch embodying a calm and impervious sense of control after many sails. At the head of the long table, the president of Europe's largest energy foundation looked at me with approving eyes, holding a crystal wine glass, and spoke in fluent, steady English to all the core members present. Today, I am pleased to formally propose to you all that Ms. Clara be invited to serve as an executive director of our Europe-Asia Joint Strategic Investment Committee, over the past 3 years. Her astonishing insight into international capital markets, decisiveness, and flawless management of global supply chain risks have not only created a business history miracle but also opened up a whole new Asia-Pacific frontier for our alliance. A thunderous round of applause erupted around me. Dozens of billion-dollar capital magnates raised their glasses in my honor. Their eyes no longer filled with initial scrutiny or doubt, but with absolute reverence and obedience. I gave a slight nod, lifted the cognac at hand, and took a small sip. My expression calm and composed. No elation, no surge of emotion. This, to me now, was nothing more than a natural consequence. From stepping out of the ruins of a domestic bridal shop 3 years ago to now sitting firmly at the pinnacle of international capital power, I have, with absolute coldness and wisdom, moved the game of destiny toward the most perfect ending. The betrayals and scheming that once thought they could trample me beneath their feet had long since become stepping stones toward the summit. Along with Ethan's night and day torment in the cold iron bars of a prison, and Jessica's wail of despair, they were all buried beneath the roaring current of time and could no longer stir even a ripple. Late after the gathering, I stood alone on the club's top-floor observation terrace. London's night wind was piercing and lucid, and the Thames shimmered with fragments of gold in the distance. I leaned against the white marble railing and gazed at this sleepless international metropolis, feeling an unprecedented sense of tranquility and vastness rise within me. Past wounds had long been forged into the hardest armor by time, and my legend had only just begun its most glorious chapter. The wind above the clouds is forever free, and I have become the one who commands its direction.